Imagine a secret so profound it could shatter everything you thought you knew about your family. A love story silenced by prejudice. A life lived in the shadows. This is the story of my mother, Elsie, and the inheritance of silence that shaped my life. If you've ever loved against the odds, felt the sting of injustice, or yearned to uncover a hidden truth, then pull up a chair, darlings. This one's for you. Widow's Hill. Even the name whispered of sorrow. The house that perched upon it, a sprawling, Gothic monstrosity, with its gables reaching like skeletal fingers towards the sky, was more than just a building. It was a mausoleum of unspoken grief. It had been in my mother's family for generations, each brick seemingly imbued with the weight of their secrets. I grew up within those walls, but I never truly felt at home. The air was thick with the scent of dust and decay, a constant reminder of the past that clung to everything. My mother, Elsie, was a creature of that house, as much a part of its shadows as the cobwebs that draped the chandeliers. She moved with a quiet grace, a ghost gliding through the rooms, her presence a mere whisper in the echoing halls. Her face, etched with lines of worry and resignation, was a map of a life unlived. Her eyes, the color of a stormy sea just before the tempest breaks, held a sadness so profound it could drown you if you looked too long. I longed to know her, to understand the source of her quiet sorrow, but she remained an enigma, a locked room I couldn't enter. Our relationship was a delicate dance of polite exchanges and averted gazes. There were no spontaneous hugs, no whispered confidences, no shared laughter echoing through the halls, just a quiet, unspoken understanding that we were bound together by blood, but separated by an invisible wall of silence. The house itself seemed to conspire against any attempt at intimacy. Each room was a stage set for a drama that had long since ended, a museum of forgotten lives. The formal parlor, with its stiff velvet furniture, and its portraits of stern-faced ancestors glaring down from the walls, was a place of hushed whispers and forced smiles. The dining room, with its long mahogany table, polished to a mirror sheen, and its heavy silver candlesticks casting long, dancing shadows, was a stage for silent meals and strained conversations. Even my own bedroom, with its faded floral wallpaper, peeling at the edges, and its collection of childhood toys gathering dust on the shelves, felt haunted by the ghosts of the past. After my mother's passing, the house felt even more desolate, the silence amplified by her absence. The air grew colder, the shadows deeper, the sense of loss more palpable. I wandered through the empty rooms, touching the objects she had touched, trying to conjure her presence. I ran my fingers over the smooth surface of her writing desk, inhaling the faint scent of lavender that lingered in her closet, and stared at her reflection in the antique mirror, searching for a glimpse of her soul. But she was gone, leaving behind only echoes and memories. It was in the attic, a dusty, forgotten space filled with discarded relics and the ghosts of forgotten dreams, that I found the box. The attic was my mother's secret domain, a place she rarely visited, but always kept locked. It was a repository of forgotten treasures and discarded memories, a testament to the lives of those who had come before us. The air up there was thick with the scent of aged paper, dried flowers, and the faint, musty odor of decay. A box was tucked away in a dark corner, hidden beneath a pile of moth-eaten quilts and forgotten toys. It was a simple wooden box, the kind you might find in a country store, tied with a faded blue ribbon, the color of a summer sky just before dusk. The wood was worn smooth with age, and the ribbon was frayed and brittle, threatening to crumble at the slightest touch. As I lifted it, I felt a strange tingling in my fingertips, as if the box held a hidden energy, a secret waiting to be unleashed. It felt heavier than it should, as if burdened by the weight of years and unspoken truths. Inside, nestled among layers of yellowed tissue paper that crackled like dry leaves, were the letters. Dozens of them, bound together with twine that had long since lost its strength, their envelopes bearing faded stamps and postmarks from distant places. The handwriting was elegant and flowing, the ink a deep sepia tone that spoke of age and time. As I read the first few lines, my heart began to pound in my chest. I knew that I had stumbled upon something extraordinary, something that would forever change my understanding of my mother and her life. The letters were from a man named Samuel, a name that was utterly foreign to me. I had never heard it mentioned in our household, never seen it written in any of my mother's journals, never even glimpsed it in her dreams. It was as if he had been deliberately erased from her life, a ghost banished from her memory. Yet as I read his words, I felt as if I had known him my entire life. His voice resonated within me, his emotions echoing in my soul. Samuel was a writer, a poet, a dreamer. His letters were filled with vivid descriptions of the natural world, with philosophical musings on life and love, and with heartfelt expressions of his devotion to Elsie. He saw her as his muse, his inspiration, his soulmate. He wrote of her beauty, her intelligence, her wit, and her unwavering spirit. He saw in her a spark of defiance, a yearning for something more than the stifling confines of Havenwood. He recognized her hidden talents, her artistic sensibilities, and her thirst for knowledge. He described their secret meetings in the woods, their stolen kisses under the starry sky, their whispered promises of a future filled with love and happiness. He wrote of their shared dreams of escaping the confines of this small town and building a life together in a place where they could be free to be themselves. He envisioned a small cottage by the sea, nestled among the dunes, where Elsie could paint and he could write, surrounded by the beauty of nature and the freedom to express their true selves. He imagined a life filled with art, music, laughter, and love. A life that was a stark contrast to the rigid and stifling atmosphere of Widow's Hill. But the letters also revealed the obstacles they faced. Samuel was not from a wealthy or influential family. He was a working-class boy with artistic aspirations, a stark contrast to the prominent and well-respected family my mother belonged to. He worked as a carpenter, building houses and furniture with his own two hands, but his heart belonged to the world of words and ideas. Her parents, particularly my grandfather, a man as rigid and unyielding as the granite cliffs that lined the coast, disapproved of their relationship, viewing Samuel as an unsuitable match for their daughter. He wanted Elsie to marry someone who could provide her with financial security and social standing, someone who would uphold the family's reputation and legacy. He saw Samuel as a threat to his plans, an obstacle to his ambitions. The looming shadow of World War II added another layer of complexity to their love story. Samuel knew that he would soon be drafted, and his letters became filled with a growing sense of anxiety and foreboding. He wrote of his fear of leaving Elsie, of his fear of never seeing her again, and of his determination to survive the war and return to her arms. He promised her that he would fight for their love, that he would overcome any obstacle to be with her. He clung to the hope that their love would be strong enough to withstand the ravages of war. He described the beauty of Havenwood, the rolling hills, the dense forests, and the sparkling ocean. He wrote of their favorite spots, the hidden meadows where they would picnic, the secluded beaches where they would swim, and the towering cliffs where they would watch the sunset. He painted a picture of a paradise lost, a world that was threatened by the encroaching darkness of war. He wanted to preserve those memories, to hold on to the beauty of their love in the face of the impending chaos. As the war raged on, Samuel's letters became more infrequent, his handwriting more shaky, his tone more somber. He wrote of the horrors he witnessed on the battlefield, the loss of his comrades, and the constant threat of death. He described the mud, the blood, the stench of decay, and the deafening roar of artillery fire. He wrote of the fear that gnawed at him day and night, the loneliness that consumed him, and the desperate longing for Elsie's touch. He saw death all around him, and he knew that he could be next. But even in the midst of such darkness, his love for Elsie remained a beacon of hope, a source of strength that kept him going. He wrote of her letters, which he treasured above all else, and of the dreams they shared, which sustained him through the darkest hours. He imagined her waiting for him, her eyes fixed on the horizon, her heart filled with hope. He clung to the belief that their love would be their salvation, that it would guide him home. He described the camaraderie he found with his fellow soldiers, the bonds forged in the crucible of war. He wrote of their shared experiences, their laughter, their tears, and their unwavering support for one another. He saw them as his brothers, his family, his lifeline in a world gone mad. Then, the letters stopped altogether. The silence was deafening, a void that swallowed everything in its path. Weeks turned into months, and the hope that had sustained me began to dwindle. My mother never spoke of Samuel, never mentioned his name. It was as if he had vanished from her life, erased from her memory. But the letters told a different story, a story of a love that endured even in the face of unimaginable loss. Driven by a need to understand what had happened, I began to investigate. I pored over old newspapers, scoured historical records, visited the local library, and interviewed elderly residents of the town. I became obsessed with finding Samuel, with uncovering the truth about his fate. I felt compelled to give him a voice, to honor his memory, and to bring closure to their story. I spent hours poring over microfilms of old newspapers, searching for any mention of Samuel, any clue that might lead me to him. I visited the local library, a grand old building with towering shelves and the scent of aged paper, and spent days sifting through dusty archives, searching for any record of his existence. I interviewed elderly residents of the town, knocking on doors and asking questions, hoping to find someone who remembered him, someone who could shed light on his disappearance. But it was as if Samuel had never existed. There was no record of his birth, his military service, or his death. The only evidence of their love was contained within that box of letters, a fragile testament to a life that could have been. It was as if he had been deliberately erased from history, his existence denied, his memory suppressed. I felt like an archaeologist, piecing together fragments of a broken vase, trying to reconstruct a story that had been deliberately erased. The more I learned, the more I realized the depth of my mother's pain and the extent of her sacrifice. I began to understand the forces that had conspired to keep them apart, the prejudices and expectations that had shaped their lives. I felt a growing sense of anger and injustice, a burning desire to set the record straight. The breakthrough came when I visited my Aunt Clara, my mother's younger sister. Clara was a frail woman in her late 80s, her body weakened by age, but her mind still sharp. She lived in a small cottage on the outskirts of town, surrounded by a garden filled with flowers and herbs. She was a keeper of secrets, a repository of family history. She had witnessed the events that had shaped my mother's life, and she knew the truth about Samuel. I had always been close to Clara, but I had never dared to ask her about my mother's past. I knew that it was a sensitive subject, a wound that had never fully healed. But now, driven by a desperate need to know the truth, I decided to take the risk. I knew that she was the only one who could provide me with the answers I sought. I brought the box of letters with me, hoping that they would jog her memory. As I showed them to her, I saw a flicker of recognition in her eyes, a hint of sadness that mirrored my own. She hesitated at first, reluctant to speak, but eventually she agreed to tell me the truth. Her voice was weak and raspy, but her words were clear and precise. Clara revealed that my grandfather had actively sabotaged Elsie in Samuel's relationship. He had intercepted Samuel's letters, preventing Elsie from knowing that he was still alive and still loved her. He had fabricated a story about Samuel's death in battle, crushing Elsie's spirit and convincing her that all hope was lost. He had even gone so far as to forge a letter from the War Department, informing Elsie that Samuel had been killed in action. He had used his influence and his connections to ensure that his deception was never discovered. Desperate and heartbroken, Elsie had succumbed to the pressure of her family and married a man they deemed suitable, a wealthy businessman named Arthur. Arthur was a kind and decent man, but Elsie never loved him. She lived out her days in quiet resignation, her heart forever yearning for the man she had lost. She fulfilled her duties as a wife and mother, but she never truly lived. She was a prisoner in her own life, trapped by the expectations of others. Clara also revealed a shocking secret. Samuel had survived the war. He had returned to town hoping to find Elsie, only to discover that she had married someone else. Devastated, he had left and was never heard from again. My grandfather, fearing that Samuel's return would disrupt Elsie's marriage and tarnish the family's reputation, had spread rumors about him, effectively erasing him from the town's collective memory. He had used his power and his wealth to silence Samuel, to ensure that his story was never told. Clara told me that my mother had known the truth about Samuel's fate. She had discovered her father's deception years after the fact, but by then it was too late. She was trapped in a loveless marriage, bound by duty and obligation. She had chosen to remain silent, to protect her family and to avoid further scandal. But the knowledge of what had been done to her had haunted her for the rest of her life. It had cast a long shadow over her existence, shaping her personality and influencing her decisions. The truth hit me like a tidal wave, washing over me with a force that left me breathless. My mother had been robbed of her happiness, her life dictated by the prejudices and expectations of others. Samuel had been denied the chance to live the life he deserved, his love sacrificed on the altar of societal norms. Their story was a tragedy, a testament to the destructive power of silence and prejudice. I felt a surge of anger, not just at my grandfather for his cruelty, but at the entire system that had allowed such injustice to occur. I raged against the constraints of society, the rigid expectations, and the suffocating silence that had destroyed their love. I felt a burning desire to challenge the status quo, to fight for a world where love knows no boundaries. But beneath the anger, there was also a profound sense of sadness, a deep empathy for my mother and Samuel, and for all those who have been denied the right to love freely. I understood the sacrifices they had made, the pain they had endured, and the burden they had carried for so many years. I felt a deep connection to them, a sense of shared humanity that transcended time and circumstance. I realized that my mother's silence was not a sign of weakness, but a testament to her strength. She had endured unimaginable pain, yet she had never lost her capacity for love. She had carried the weight of her secret with grace and dignity, protecting me from the truth and shielding me from the pain. She had chosen to remain silent for my sake, sacrificing her own happiness for my well-being. I decided to honor their memory by breaking the cycle of silence and sharing their story. I wanted the world to know that their love had existed, that it had mattered, and that it deserved to be remembered. I wanted to give them a voice, to tell their story with honesty and compassion. I wanted to inspire others to speak their truth, to challenge injustice, and to fight for a world where love triumphs over hate. I started writing, pouring out my heart onto the page, weaving together the fragments of their lives into a tapestry of love, loss, and resilience. I wrote about their stolen moments, their whispered promises, and their unwavering belief in a future that was never to be. I wrote about the obstacles they faced, the sacrifices they made, and the pain they endured. I wrote about the power of love to overcome adversity and the importance of speaking truth to power. And as I wrote, I began to heal. The house on the hill no longer felt like a prison. It had become a sanctuary, a place where I could connect with my past and honor my mother's memory. I filled it with light and laughter, with music and art, creating the kind of home she had always dreamed of. I transformed the house into a haven of creativity and self-expression, a place where others could find solace and inspiration. I planted a garden, filling it with flowers that reminded me of her, roses, lilies, and forget-me-nots. I sat on the porch in the evenings, watching the sunset, imagining her and Samuel walking hand in hand through the fields, their laughter echoing through the trees. I found peace in the beauty of nature, and I felt their presence all around me. I never found Samuel, but I knew that his spirit lived on in the letters, in the memories of those who had known him, and in the love that had transcended time and circumstance. I imagined him somewhere, perhaps in a small cottage by the sea, writing his poems and dreaming of Elsie. I hoped that he had found happiness, that he had found peace, and that he knew that he was never forgotten. And so, I share this story with you, a story of forbidden love, of societal constraints, and of the enduring power of the human spirit. It is a story that deserves to be told, a story that needs to be heard. It is a story that reminds us to cherish. And so, I share this story with you, a story of forbidden love, of societal constraints, and of the enduring power of the human spirit. It is a story that deserves to be told, a story that needs to be heard. It is a story that reminds us to cherish the love we have, to fight for the love we desire, and to never let anyone silence our hearts. Darlings, if there's one thing I've learned from a life lived long and seen much, it's that silence is a dangerous thing. It allows injustice to fester, secrets to poison, and dreams to wither. My mother's story is a testament to the devastating consequences of unspoken truths. But it's also a reminder that even in the darkest of times, love can endure and the human spirit can triumph. Don't let the world tell you who to love, how to live, or what to believe. Your voice matters, your story matters, and your truth deserves to be heard. Now, I want to hear from you. Did Elsie and Samuel's story touch your heart? Have you ever felt silenced or had to fight for a love that others didn't understand? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. Let's create a space where we can all connect, support each other, and break the chains of silence together. And if you found this story moving and want to hear more tales of love, loss, and resilience from a granny who's seen it all, then be sure to subscribe to my channel. Click that little bell icon so you don't miss a single story. Because here, we believe that every life has a story worth telling, and every voice deserves to be heard. Thank you for listening, darlings. Remember, love fiercely, speak your truth, and never let anyone steal your dreams. Until next time.